I woke up at 3 a.m. and saw something in my son and daughter-in-law's room that made me grab my grandkids and run from there. Even now, when I think about that moment, my hands shake a little. It was the kind of moment you never expect in your life, something that changes everything inside you. It was quiet, too quiet. The house felt heavy, like it was holding its breath with me. I remember standing in the hallway, half awake, trying to understand what was happening. The weak yellow light from the night bulb touched the walls, and the shadows were long and strange. I could hear the soft breathing of my grandkids from their room, and somewhere inside me a strange feeling was rising, a feeling that something was not right. People often say that a mother's heart can sense danger. Maybe that was true for grandmothers too. Because that night at 3 a.m., I felt something pull me toward my son and daughter-in-law's room, something that would break my heart and make me question everything I thought I knew. I had come to stay with them only for a few days. They needed help with the kids because my daughter-in-law had been unwell and my son was busy with work. I did not mind at all. Spending time with my grandchildren always made me happy. Their laughter, their little hands holding mine, the way they called me Dottie, those were the small joys that kept my heart alive. But that night, nothing felt joyful. I remember walking slowly toward their room. My feet were cold and the floor felt like ice. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was instinct. I don't know. All I knew was that something was waiting behind that half-open door. When I pushed the door gently, the sound was soft, but in that silence, it felt loud, too loud. And when I looked inside, my heart almost stopped. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I stood frozen, my hand on the door, my mind unable to understand what my eyes were seeing. It was like the world had slowed down, like everything inside that room was happening in slow motion. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even speak. I just felt something inside me break, quietly, painfully, like a thin thread snapping after holding too much weight for too long. And then, without thinking, I ran to my grandchildren's room. I lifted the younger one in my arms, held the older one by the hand, and whispered, "Come with me, right now." Maybe they sensed the fear in my voice. Maybe they knew something was wrong too. They didn't ask any questions. They just held on to me as tightly as I held on to them. We stepped out of that house quietly. The air outside was cold, and the sky was still dark, but somehow being outside felt safer than being inside. As we walked down the street, I remember thinking, how did it come to this? How did we reach a point where I had to run away with my own grandchildren in the middle of the night?
It wasn't always like this. No. There was a time when our family was full of love, laughter, and togetherness. There was a time when I believed my son had the perfect life, a good job, a loving wife, 2 beautiful children, a warm home. I used to look at them and feel proud. I used to think, my son is happy. That is all a mother wants. But life doesn't always stay the way you imagine it. Sometimes pain hides behind closed doors. Sometimes people smile on the outside but drown on the inside. And sometimes the people you trust the most show you a side of themselves you never knew existed. As we reached the end of the street, I stopped to breathe. My chest hurt. My eyes were burning. My mind kept replaying what I had seen at 3 a.m. over and over again. And I knew that moment would change everything. It would change my relationship with my son. It would change the way I saw my daughter-in-law. It would change the future of those two innocent children holding my hands. But at that moment, I couldn't think about the future. I could only think about getting them somewhere safe. Sometimes life pushes us into making choices we never imagined making. Choices that leave marks on our hearts. Choices that make us question ourselves. Was I right to leave like that? Was I overreacting? Should I have stayed and tried to talk? Should I have woken them up? These questions would come later, many hours later, but not at 3 a.m. At 3 a.m., all I knew was this: I had to protect my grandchildren. I had to trust my instincts, and I had to walk away from something that felt wrong, terribly wrong. As we walked a little farther, I looked at my grandkids. They were still half asleep, their faces calm, unaware of what had happened. Their small hands in mine gave me strength. I whispered to myself, "Everything will be okay. I will make it okay." I didn't know how. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know how my son would react when he found out. I didn't know how my daughter-in-law would explain herself. I didn't know how broken this family would become after that night. All I knew was that this story, my story, did not begin at 3 a.m. The truth was, the cracks had started long before that. Little moments, little signs, little things I ignored because I wanted to believe everything was fine. But life doesn't hide the truth forever. One day it shows you everything, even the things you wish you had never seen. And for me, that day was at 3 a.m.
After we walked away from the house that night, and after the cold air settled around us, my mind slowly drifted backward to the days before everything changed, before the quiet cracks appeared, before the distance grew between us, before the moment at 3 a.m. People often assume big tragedies come suddenly, but in my life, pain came like a slow whisper, soft, almost invisible, easy to ignore, until it becomes a storm. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand our family. You need to see where we came from, how we lived, and how slowly things started to fall apart. Because the truth did not begin in the early morning darkness. It began many years before that. My son, Arav, was always a quiet child. Even when he was small, he never cried loudly. He never demanded toys. He never argued. Sometimes I worried he kept too much inside. But people told me, "You are lucky. Quiet children grow into gentlemen." And they were right. He grew into a gentle, hard-working man. He always helped me around the house. He always respected his teachers. He studied late into the night so he could make something of himself. When his father passed away, Arav was only 17, a boy trying to act like a man. I still remember the way he stood beside me during the funeral, stiff, pale, trying so hard not to cry. And when we came home that evening, he held my hand and said, "Don't worry, Ma, I will take care of everything." Children should not have to say those words. But he did. From that day he worked harder. He took part-time jobs after school. He saved every rupee. He tried to fill his father's place, even though no child should ever feel that responsibility. I used to worry he was burning himself out, but he always smiled and said, "I'm okay, Ma, really." Years passed. He finished his studies. He got a good job. And when he brought home a girl to introduce to me, I saw something gentle in his eyes again, a softness I had not seen since he was a boy. Her name was Meera. She was cheerful, talkative, and full of energy. The opposite of my son. But maybe that is why he fell in love with her. Opposites attract, they say. The first time she visited our home, she brought flowers and sweets. She touched my feet. She sat with me, asking about my health and my hobbies. She talked like she already considered herself part of the family. I liked her. I really did. After the marriage, the house felt warmer. There was laughter again. There were small arguments over silly things, but sweet ones. "Where is the remote?" or "Why didn't you eat the breakfast I made?"
For a short while, I felt like our home had begun to breathe again. Then the grandchildren came. Little Ria first, then Arush. Two bright lights shaping our world. Their tiny fingers grabbed our hearts from the moment they arrived. I remember holding Ria for the first time. Her eyes were closed, her breaths tiny, and she fit into my arms like she had always belonged there. Arav stood beside me, smiling proudly. Mira was tired but glowing with happiness. Those were peaceful years, simple mornings, warm evenings.
Stories before bedtime, small joys, unnoticed at the time, but precious now. If someone told me back then that one day I would wake up at 3 a.m. and run out of their house with my grandchildren, I would have laughed. I would have said, impossible. Our family would never break like that. But families break quietly, like thin ice. After my grandchildren were born, things slowly began to change. At first, they seemed like normal changes, the changes every family goes through. My son began working more, projects, deadlines, late nights. My daughter-in-law seemed more stressed, less patient, more tired. I did not think much of it. 2 children are not easy. A home is not easy. Young marriage is not easy. But slowly I began noticing small things. Sometimes I would see Meera sitting alone in the kitchen, staring at her phone with a strange expression, not sad, not angry, but lost. Sometimes Ara would come home and sit quietly on the couch, staring at the floor, not saying a word. Sometimes the house felt unusually silent, as if the air itself was holding tension. Small arguments began. Not big fights, just coldness. A sentence said too sharply, a reply said too slowly, a door closed a little harder than usual. And when I asked, "Is everything okay?" both of them would smile and say, "Yes, ma, everything is fine." I wanted to believe them. I needed to believe them. But a mother knows when something is wrong. Still, I stayed quiet. I didn't want to interfere. A few months before the incident, I noticed Meera had changed more than my son. She spent long hours in her room. Her phone was always in her hand. She spoke less to me. She laughed less with the children. She often said she was tired. And I understood. She was a young mother with many responsibilities. But sometimes the tiredness looked like something else. Like her mind was somewhere far away. Once I asked her gently, "Are you okay, beta?" She gave a small smile. "Just tired, ma. Nothing more." But her eyes said something different. Something heavy. Something she did not want to share. I didn't push her. Maybe I should have. Maybe things would have turned out differently if I had asked more questions. But life does not give you warnings before the storm. My son, on the other hand, became even quieter than before. He stopped talking about work, he stopped spending time with his friends, his shoulders always looked tense. His eyes were tired, as if he hadn't slept well in weeks. When he came home, he no longer walked with energy. He walked like someone carrying invisible weight. Sometimes I would offer tea and he would smile politely, but the smile would disappear too quickly. Once I told him, "You look tired, beta." He replied softly, "I am fine, ma. Just work pressure." But it wasn't just work. A mother knows when it isn't work. Something inside that house was breaking. Slowly, quietly, painfully. Then one day, Meera called me. Her voice sounded calm but strange. Too calm. "Ma, can you come stay with us for a few days? I need help with the kids. I am not feeling well these days." I did not hesitate. Of course I would come. They were my children. They needed me. When I reached their house, both of them greeted me politely. But something felt off. The warmth was missing. The smiles were small. Their eyes never met each other's. The house was clean, but the air felt heavy. Like the silence was telling me stories no one wanted to say out loud. I decided not to ask anything directly. I simply slipped into my role as a mother and grandmother, cooking, feeding the kids, helping around. The children seemed happy to see me, especially little Ria.
She clung to me the whole evening. Arush kept showing me his toys. Their innocence was refreshing, like a small light in a dim room. That night, I slept lightly. I don't know why. Maybe the house felt different, maybe the silence was too loud, maybe I sensed something without realizing it. In the middle of the night, around 2 a.m., I woke up and felt a strange uneasiness. I walked a little, drank water, checked on the children, and went back to bed. I told myself, everything is fine, you are just overthinking. But an hour later, at exactly 3 a.m., something made me get up again. This time it was stronger, like someone was pulling me toward the hallway, like something wanted me to see the truth I had been ignoring.
I stepped out quietly. The house was dark. The only light was the soft glow from under my son and daughter-in-law's door. I walked slowly toward it. My heart was beating fast. My hands were cold. My breath shallow. I had no idea that what I was about to see would break my world. When I look back now, I see how perfect everything looked to outsiders. A hardworking son, a beautiful daughter-in-law, two adorable grandchildren, a comfortable home, respectful neighbors, stability, order. People used to say, "You must be proud, your son has a good life." And I smiled, because I believed it too. But all perfect pictures hide their cracks. Sometimes the cracks are behind the frame. Sometimes they are inside people's hearts. Sometimes the family you think is strong is actually falling apart piece by piece. My son and daughter-in-law never shouted, never fought loudly, never threw things. They hid their pain with silence. Their silence created distance. Their distance created more silence. I didn't see the signs clearly. I saw little things, but I assumed they were normal. I kept telling myself, they are young, they will fix it. Every couple fights sometimes. They are stressed, that's all. But sometimes silence is not peace. Sometimes silence is a warning. And at 3 a.m., silence became a truth that I could no longer avoid. The evening before the 3 a.m. incident was strangely quiet. Dinner was silent. Arav barely spoke. Meera barely ate. The children laughed, but their laughter echoed strangely as if trying to fill the emptiness. When I put the children to sleep, Ria looked at me and said something that stayed in my heart. "Dadi, why do Mama and Papa not smile anymore?" I smiled softly and kissed her forehead. "They love you very much, beta. They are just tired." She nodded, trusting my words. But I didn't trust them. Later that night, I sat alone in the living room, thinking. The house felt wrong, too quiet, too tense. I wanted to talk to my son. But when I went to his room, he was already asleep, or pretending to be. His back was turned, his phone screen glowed softly beside him. I walked back to my room and lay down. But sleep would not come. Little did I know that in just a few hours everything would shatter.
The night was silent, but inside my heart, something was moving, something heavy, something restless. I did not know what it was, but I could feel it like a weight pressing down on my chest. By the time the clock reached 3 a.m., I was wide awake, lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The house felt unusually still. No sound from the fan, no distant noise from outside, no footsteps. Just a long, deep silence that felt unnatural. I sat up slowly, feeling a chill run across my arms. I don't know why I decided to leave the bed at that exact moment. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it was fear, maybe it was that small voice inside all mothers and grandmothers, the voice that whispers, "Something is wrong." I walked into the hallway. The floor felt cold under my feet. I wrapped my shawl around myself as I moved toward the children's room. They were sleeping peacefully, little angels in the soft moonlight. Ria's hair was spread across the pillow. Arush was holding his blanket tightly. I felt a small smile tug at my lips. For a moment, everything felt normal. But then, something caught my eye. Light. A soft, strange light coming from the room at the end of the hallway. My son and daughter-in-law's room. The door was slightly open, just enough for a faint, warm glow to spill onto the floor. That was unusual. They always slept with the lights off. Both of them preferred darkness. Even when the kids were babies, they kept only a tiny nightlight in the corner. But tonight, their room felt different, like someone was awake, or something was happening. My heart began to beat faster. I stepped closer. My breath felt heavy. My mind was racing with questions. Are they okay? Is someone sick? Should I knock? And then, without thinking, I placed my hand on the door and pushed it gently. The door opened without a sound. What I saw inside that room froze me in place. For a few seconds, I didn't move. I didn't blink. My body felt like stone. The room was quiet, but not peaceful. There was tension in the air, thick enough to feel. My son was awake, sitting on the edge of the bed. His hands were gripping his head. His shoulders were shaking slightly, as if he had been crying.
I had not seen him cry since his father's funeral. Mira was sitting on the chair near the window, her face turned away, her posture stiff, her hands folded tightly on her lap. They were not looking at each other. They were not talking. They were not sleeping. They were simply there. Two people trapped in a storm of their own. My heart tightened. I whispered softly, "Arav?" He looked up suddenly. His eyes were red, tired, and full of something I could not understand. "Ma, you're awake?" he said, forcing a weak smile. Before I could reply, Mira spoke without turning her head. "It's nothing, Ma. We're just talking." But the tone, it wasn't nothing. It wasn't a talk. It was something else, something heavy and painful. I stepped inside slowly. "What happened?" I asked quietly. Neither of them answered. The silence grew thicker, almost suffocating. Arav wiped his eyes quickly and stood up. "It's late, Ma. Please go back to sleep," he said softly, trying to sound normal. But nothing was normal. I could see the tension in his shoulders. I could see how tightly Mira's fingers were gripping each other. I could feel the distance between them. I could sense the fear in the room. I should have left. I should have respected their privacy. I should have closed the door gently and walked away. But love makes us stay, and fear makes us look deeper. So I stood there, trying to understand. "Arav," I said again, "talk to me." He looked at me with eyes full of pain. Then he looked away, as if he could not bear to meet my gaze. Mira finally turned her head toward me. Her eyes were tired, swollen, and full of something like anger mixed with sadness. "Ma," she said softly, "everything is fine. Please, let us handle it." But the more they tried to hide it, the clearer it became. Something had been breaking between them for a long time. And tonight, it was no longer hidden. I felt helpless. Two people I loved deeply were falling apart, and I could do nothing but watch. I turned slowly, feeling a heavy ache inside, and started to walk out of the room. But before I reached the door, I heard something. Something small, but sharp, like a whisper filled with hurt. It was Mira's voice.
she said. "I can't live like this anymore." My heart stopped for a moment. I turned back quickly. Arav was staring at her, speechless. "What do you mean?" he whispered. Mira closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. "This marriage, this life, this stress, I can't do it anymore." I felt like the ground moved beneath my feet. Leaving? Ending the marriage? Breaking the family? Was that what she meant? Arab's voice trembled. "Mira, please, don't say that." "I'm tired," she whispered. "I'm tired of pretending everything is okay." He walked toward her, but she moved away slightly, as if his touch would break her even more. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice soft, almost pleading. "I tried," she said. "You never listened." "I didn't know." "You never asked." The pain in her voice cut through the room like a blade. I stood frozen, watching the cracks widen before me. Arav sank onto his knees slowly, his face buried in his hands. "Please, don't do this," he whispered. Mira wiped her tears quickly. "And I don't want to fight in front of Ma. Let's talk in the morning."
Talk in the morning. As if hearts could wait, as if pain could sleep, Arav stood up, defeated. A long silence followed. I stepped back slowly, my heart pounding. I whispered, "I'm right here if you need me." Neither of them replied. As I walked out, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Something terrible had begun. This was not a normal argument, not a small misunderstanding, not a temporary stress. This was the beginning of something that would tear the family apart. And deep inside, I knew the real storm had not even started yet. I could not sleep after leaving their room. I lay in bed, staring into the darkness, listening to the heavy silence in the house. It felt like every breath, every tiny sound was carrying the weight of something breaking. I kept replaying Mira's words again and again. "I can't live like this anymore." Those words were not just tiredness, not just frustration, not just a moment of anger. They were final, cold, exhausted, like someone who had been holding pain for too long and had finally reached the point where something inside simply stopped trying. I wanted to believe this was just one bad night, just one emotional moment. But deep down, I knew this was the confession of a woman who had silently suffered for months. And my son, my quiet, gentle son, I had never seen him break like that. I kept turning on the bed, unable to settle my heart. 1,000 questions filled my mind. What happened to them? What pushed them this far? Why did I not notice earlier? Could I have saved them from this pain? But no answer came. Only the ache of helplessness. When the sun finally rose, I felt a strange heaviness in my bones. I walked out to the kitchen, hoping to see a normal morning. Some hint that the night had just been an emotional moment, nothing serious. But the kitchen was empty. The house was silent. Too silent. I found Mira sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the wall. She looked tired, distant, and so small inside that big room. Her usually bright eyes looked dull, like a flame that had burnt too long and lost its light. I said gently, "Beta." She didn't look at me. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Ma, I'm sorry you heard us." "You don't have to be sorry," I whispered. "I'm worried. Tell me what's going on." For a long moment she didn't speak. Then she said something I was not prepared for. "I feel alone, Ma."
My heart squeezed. She wiped a tear slowly, as if her hand had no energy left. I feel alone in this house even when everyone is here. I placed my hand on his gently. Why, beta? I asked softly. You are not alone. You have Arav. You have the children. She gave a sad smile. Yes, I have them, but I don't feel like I do.
Her voice cracked, but she kept speaking. I try to talk. I try to share, but Arav shuts me out. Every time I try to open my heart, he closes his. I stayed quiet. I wanted her to speak freely. She continued, her voice trembling. He stopped listening to me, Ma. Stopped noticing me. Stopped seeing me. I looked at her carefully. There was no anger in her voice, only quiet pain. I feel like a shadow in this house, she whispered. I wanted to tell her things would get better. I wanted to comfort her. But before I could speak, Arav walked into the room. He looked exhausted. His eyes were swollen, his face pale. He must have barely slept. He stopped when he saw us sitting together. For a moment, no one spoke. Then he said quietly, Ma, can I talk to Mira alone? But Mira shook her head. No, she said softly. No more closed-door talks. No more whispered fights. No more secrets. Arav stared at her, hurt by her words, but understanding the truth in them. Then talk, he said, sitting across from her. A silence settled between them, one that felt like the moment before a storm explodes. Arav took a deep breath. What do you want from me, Mira? He asked softly. Not much, just a husband who sees me, a partner who stands with me. I do stand with you, he said quickly. Her voice was calm when she answered. No, you don't. I felt my breath catch. Her tone was not accusing. It was simply honest. You're always tired, she continued. You're always stressed. You don't talk to me. You don't share your worries. You don't let me in. Arav rubbed his forehead. I'm doing all this for the family. For you. For the kids. She said softly. I know. And I'm grateful. But what's the use of a family when we don't speak to each other? What's the use of a house if we don't feel like a home? For the first time, Arav looked directly at her, and I saw pain in his eyes. Mira, I never meant to push you away. She looked down at her hands. But you did. Arav swallowed hard. You could have told me sooner. She shook her head. I tried, she whispered, so many times. But every time I spoke, you looked exhausted, or distracted, or frustrated. I didn't want to add to your problems. Arav closed his eyes briefly. I thought I was protecting you by keeping my stress to myself. Mira's voice softened. And I thought I was protecting you by hiding my loneliness. Their eyes met. Two people who loved each other deeply, but had lost the path to reach each other. The silence between them was heartbreaking. Finally, Mira whispered, Arav, we can't keep living like this. The children feel it. The house feels it. We feel it. He nodded slowly, tears filling his eyes. I know, he said, but I don't know how to fix it. And that broke me. My son, the boy who always tried to protect everyone, didn't know how to protect his own marriage.
I felt tears rising in my eyes. Two people I loved were falling apart right in front of me, and I could not fix it. I wanted to hold them both, tell them everything would be all right. But sometimes love is not enough. Sometimes people drift apart slowly without meaning to. I spoke gently. Beta, every marriage has pain. But pain is not the end. It is a sign that something needs attention. You must listen to each other. Arav nodded. I want to listen, he said quietly. I want to make things right. Mira looked away. I don't know if we can, she whispered. That sentence felt like a knife in my heart. Arav looked terrified, as if he was losing everything. Please don't say that, he whispered. Meera wiped another tear. I'm tired of breaking inside, Arav. And then she stood up slowly and walked toward the bedroom. Arav sat there defeated. I sat beside him. He didn't look at me. He just whispered, I feel like I'm losing her, Ma. I placed my hand on his shoulder. Then don't let her go, I said softly. Fight for your family. Fight for her. He nodded weakly. I will try. And I believed him. But sometimes trying comes too late. Sometimes the storm has already begun, and love is no longer enough to hold the pieces together. That evening, the house grew even colder. Meera barely spoke. Arav kept pacing around quietly. The children sensed something, though they didn't understand. And beneath the quietness of that night, another tension was growing. Something darker. Something nobody expected. Something that would lead to the moment at 3 a.m., the moment that changed our lives.
That house remained tense for the rest of the day. It felt like every room was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Even the walls seemed to listen quietly, as if they could feel the weight of unspoken words and unhealed wounds. Arav stayed mostly in the living room, moving restlessly from chair to window, then back to the sofa. Meera stayed inside the bedroom, the door slightly open, but her heart completely closed. I tried to keep things normal, making tea, cleaning the kitchen, folding clothes, but nothing felt normal. Every small sound echoed loudly. Every silence felt deeper than the night itself. When dinner time came, I prepared something simple. Warm dal, soft rice, a little sabzi. Comfort food for a house that desperately needed comfort. I called them both gently. Meera came out first. Arav followed a moment later. They sat at the table, but did not look at each other. The children's voices were the only cheerful sound in the room. They laughed at small things, unaware of the storm adults try so hard to hide from them. I watched both of them carefully. Meera tried to smile at the kids, but it didn't reach her eyes. Arav kept glancing at her, but every time he did, she looked away. Still, they ate quietly, the calmest moment of the day, and for a brief second, I hoped the darkness had passed. But the silence between them was louder than any argument. After dinner, Meera washed the dishes. Arav offered to help. She shook her head politely. No, it's fine. He stepped back looking defeated again. Later in the evening, the children fell asleep early. I tucked them in gently, watching their peaceful faces and wishing the world could stay that simple forever. Arav and Meera, however, were like two shadows moving around each other in the hallway, close, but unable to connect. When they finally went to their room, I hoped they would talk. Really talk. Not argue, not accuse, just speak from the heart, like the people who once promised to spend a lifetime together. But things do not always go the way we hope. Sometime around midnight, I heard their voices. Not loud, not angry, just soft and sad. I could not make out the words at first, but the tone was unmistakable. Two people trying to hold on to a marriage slipping through their fingers. I closed my eyes, praying for them. The door between us was thin, but their pain felt even thinner. I heard Meera say, "We cannot keep pretending everything is fine." A long silence. Then Arav's voice, "I don't want to lose you." Another silence. A deeper one. Meera's voice trembled. "I don't want to leave,
But I also can't stay like this. Those words made my heart race. I sat up in bed, listening without meaning to. I wanted to give them space, but their pain was too loud to ignore. Arav whispered, "Give me time, Mira. I will fix this." She said softly, "I have given you time. So much time." Her voice cracked, and then I heard quiet sobs. I wanted to go to them, to hold them both, to protect them from their own heartbreak. But I stayed where I was, praying silently that they would find a way back to each other. The voices slowly faded, and eventually the house grew quiet again. But calm is not always peace. Sometimes calm is the moment before everything shatters.
Around 2:30 a.m., I woke up from a light sleep. The house was silent, but something felt wrong. Too still, too quiet, too heavy. I walked to the children's room to make sure they were sleeping peacefully. They were, curled up, warm, safe. I tucked the blanket around them a little more and stepped back quietly. But as I turned to leave, I saw something that made my heart stop. A soft, faint light was coming from Arav and Mira's room. The door was slightly open. I heard a sound, a strange, muffled sound, not crying, not talking. Something else, something that didn't feel right. My stomach tightened. Something urged me to check. I walked slowly toward the room, each step heavy with fear I couldn't understand. When I reached the door, I paused. For a second, I thought, maybe I should walk away. Maybe I should give them privacy. But something inside whispered, "Look." I pushed the door gently, just enough to see inside. And what I saw at that moment, is something I will carry in my heart forever. Arav was sitting on the floor, leaning against the bed, holding his head in his hands. His shoulders were shaking. He was crying. Not softly, not quietly. He was breaking. And Mira was sitting on the opposite side of the room, her back against the wardrobe, her face pale and empty, like someone who had lost everything. But that was not what made my heart drop, what made my body freeze, what made my breath leave me, what made me feel like the ground under my feet had disappeared, was the suitcase beside her, packed, zipped, ready. My daughter-in-law was leaving the house, leaving the marriage, leaving my son, leaving the children. At 3 a.m., my breath shook as the truth hit me. This was real. This was happening. This family was breaking in front of my eyes. I could not move. I could not speak. Arav lifted his head slowly, his eyes red, swollen, lost. He whispered, "Ma, she's going." Those words shattered something inside me. I stepped inside the room without thinking. "Mira," I whispered. She looked at me with a face full of silent pain, the pain of a woman who had reached her final limit. "I'm sorry, Ma. I can't stay. Not like this." Her voice trembled. She wasn't angry. She wasn't cold. She was broken. And in that moment, I knew she truly believed she had no other choice. Arav reached for her hand, but she pulled back gently. "Please," he whispered, "please don't go."
Mira closed her eyes tightly. I need to breathe air of... I need peace. I need myself. And then she stood up. She reached for the suitcase, and that was when something inside me screamed. The children...
If Meera left in this state, if Arav broke any further, if the house turned into chaos, the children would wake up into a world falling apart. I could not let that happen. Not in front of them. Not at 3 a.m., not like this. I turned away instantly and rushed to the kids' room. My hands were shaking as I lifted the little ones gently. They were still asleep, unaware, innocent. I held them close, one in each arm, their warm breaths touching my shoulder. And without thinking, without planning, without even understanding fully, I grabbed the children and ran, out of the room, out of the house, into the cold early morning air. Because sometimes in moments of chaos, the only thing a mother or grandmother can do is protect the little ones, even if her own heart is breaking. When I stepped out of the house with the children in my arms, the air outside felt cold and sharp, like the world itself was holding its breath. The darkness of early morning wrapped around us, soft but heavy, and the silence of the neighborhood felt almost unreal, as if time had frozen just for our pain. The children were still asleep, their small heads resting on my shoulders, unaware the storm their parents were drowning in. I tightened my hold on them, not because I feared someone would take them away, but because, at that moment, they felt like the only steady part of a world that was falling apart piece by piece. I had not planned anything. I did not know where I was going. I didn't even know if leaving the house was the right decision. But sometimes the heart moves faster than the mind. Sometimes instinct becomes stronger than logic. And my instinct said, get the children away from the breaking. Get them away from the shouting, the crying, the goodbye. At least for now, protect their peace. I walked down the driveway slowly, barefoot, my thin shawl wrapped around the children. The streetlights flickered softly, casting long shadows on the ground. Every few steps I looked back at the house. A house that had once been filled with laughter. A house that had seen birthday parties, Diwali lights, warm dinners, and soft lullabies. Tonight, that same house looked like a place of heartbreak. I whispered softly to myself, just walk, don't stop, don't think. My mind was racing, my heart was shaking, but my steps kept moving forward. I wasn't running away from them. I was buying time. I was giving those two broken hearts space to fall apart without hurting the children. When I reached the end of the street, I finally stopped. The children stirred a little, but didn't wake. I stood there, breathing deeply, trying to calm the trembling in my chest. That was when the first tear fell. Not because I was scared, not because it was cold, but because the truth finally hit me. The marriage I had believed in, the home I thought was stable, the family I thought was unbreakable, was in danger. Real danger. Not small misunderstandings, not temporary discomfort, but something deeper. I sat on the low boundary wall near the street corner, the children still in my lap. The sky was a deep shade of blue, the kind that comes just before sunrise. I closed my eyes and whispered, God, please help us. As I sat there in the cold, memories from years ago came rushing back. The day Arav was born. The way he cried, tiny and helpless, but so full of life. The day he took his first steps. The way he ran straight into my arms with the biggest smile. The day he introduced Meera to me, his voice shy and hopeful. The day they got married, looking at each other like the world had finally given them everything they ever wanted. And now, that same sun was breaking. That same daughter-in-law was leaving. That same home was shaking. I never imagined I would see this day. Never imagined I would hold their children at 3 a.m. and wonder how everything had reached this point. While I sat there, the wind picked up slightly, brushing against my face. The children shifted in my arms,
and instinctively I held them closer. For a moment, I thought about going straight to a relative's house, or calling a cab, or walking to the nearest temple to sit in silence until sunrise. But then something inside me whispered, "You cannot stay away forever. You must go back. You must face what is happening." Running away, even temporarily, did not feel right anymore. I needed to return before the children woke up and panicked. I needed to be there for Arav and Meera. I needed to see what decision Meera would take. So I stood up slowly and began walking back toward the house. Each step felt heavier than the last. When I reached the front gate, I paused. The house looked brighter now. Not emotionally, but literally. The lights in the living room were on. A shadow moved behind the curtains. They must have noticed the children were gone. I tightened my grip on the little ones and walked toward the door.
When I stepped inside, the atmosphere felt thick with tension, but also with fear. Arav was standing near the center of the living room, his hair messy, eyes red, breathing fast as if he had been running. When he saw me, he rushed forward. "Ma, where were you?" His voice was shaking. He looked almost panicked. Before I could answer, Meera stepped out from their room. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen, her hand trembling. She looked at me, then at the children, and her face crumpled with guilt. "Ma," she whispered, "why did you leave with them like that?" I didn't shout. I didn't accuse her. I didn't even raise my voice. I whispered softly, "Because I didn't want them to see you leaving." That sentence, that simple sentence fell into the room like a heavy stone. Arav's face broke again. Meera covered her mouth with her hand, trying not to cry. I walked to the sofa and gently laid the children down. They were still asleep, innocent and unaware. Then I turned to both of them. I spoke calmly, not as a judge, not as a mother-in-law, not as someone taking sides, but as someone who loved them both deeply. "I saw the suitcase," I said softly. Meera's eyes filled with tears instantly. "I wasn't going to take the children," she whispered. "I was just leaving." "I know, and that is the problem." Arav whispered. "Ma, I can't lose her." He was shaking. His voice was breaking. Meera sat down slowly. "I don't want to leave, Ma, but I can't stay in pain." I walked closer to her and knelt beside her. "Beta," I said gently, "leaving at 3 a.m. is not a solution. Running away from pain does not heal it." She looked up, her eyes full of exhaustion. "Then what will heal it?" I turned to Arav, and for the first time, he didn't hide his tears. "I don't know how to fix it," he whispered, "but I'll do anything." Meera closed her eyes as tears rolled down her cheeks. She said softly, "That's the problem. You always say you'll fix things later, but later never comes." The room fell silent. Not angry silence, not bitter silence, just tired silence. I took both their hands gently and placed them together. Arav didn't pull away. Meera didn't resist. I said quietly, "Tonight you both reached a point of breaking. But breaking can also become turning only if you both choose it." Meera whispered, "I am tired, Ma." Arav whispered, "So am I." "Good," I said softly, "because tired hearts finally stop pretending, and when pretending ends, healing can begin." They looked at each other, really looked for the first time. Something softened in Meera's face, something steadied in Arav's face, something shifted in the room. And that was the moment, the exact moment when the breaking began to turn towards healing. Not fully,
Not magically, not instantly, but the direction changed. And sometimes that is enough to save a family.
Something gentle settled in the room after that. Not peace, not yet, but something softer than the storm we had been trapped in. Arav and Meera were sitting beside each other, their hands touching, their breathing uneven, their hearts still hurting. But for the first time, they were facing the pain together, not against each other. The children slept quietly on the sofa, their small bodies curled under a blanket, unaware of how close their world had come to splitting apart. The silence between the three of us was heavy, but not the suffocating kind anymore. It was the kind of silence that invites truth, the kind that lets people speak without fear. I sat across from them, my hands resting in my lap, waiting. Sometimes silence heals more than words. Finally, Arav spoke. "Ma," he whispered, his voice shaky. "Do you know why I stopped talking to Meera?" Meera looked at him, surprised. Not angry, just surprised that he was ready to speak. I nodded gently. "Tell us." He looked down at his hands. "I was scared," he said softly. "Every day I woke up with fear." Meera frowned in confusion. "Fear of what?" she asked quietly. Arav swallowed hard before answering. "Fear of failing you," he whispered. The room stilled. He continued, voice trembling. "I wanted to give you a good life, a stable home, comfort, security. But work kept getting harder, the bills kept increasing. Everything felt like it was slipping out of my hands." He wiped his eyes roughly. "And I thought if I shared all this with you, Meera, you would worry. You would get scared. You would think I wasn't strong enough." Meera's face softened with sudden understanding. "Arav, I never asked you to carry everything alone." He nodded slowly. "But I thought that was my role, my duty, my responsibility. I didn't want to burden you." Then his voice cracked. "But by trying to protect you, I ended up losing you." Meera looked at him for a long moment, and then whispered, "Arav, you didn't lose me." Her voice trembled as she added, "You just shut me out."
Arav turned toward her, listening with full attention for the first time in months. Meera continued softly, tears gathering in her eyes. "When you stopped talking to me, Arav, I didn't think you were stressed." She paused, her voice hurt. "I thought you didn't need me anymore." Arav's face fell. She went on, her tone full of quiet grief. "You came home tired. You barely looked at me. You ate silently. You slept early. You stopped laughing. You stopped sitting with me. You stopped asking how I felt." Her lips trembled. "I felt like a stranger in your life." Arav shook his head quickly. "No, Meera, you were never a stranger." She looked away. "But that's how it felt." I looked at both of them. Two people who loved each other deeply, but had built walls of misunderstanding so high they couldn't see over them. Miscommunication, fear, stress, silence. These small things had grown roots and slowly cracked the foundation of their marriage. I spoke softly, trying not to disturb the fragile moment forming between them. "Beta, marriages don't break in one day. They break slowly, when people stop seeing each other." Meera nodded, her eyes wet. "I didn't want to leave," she whispered. "I only wanted Arav to notice my pain." Arav looked at her, tears rolling freely now. "I saw your pain," he said quietly. "I just didn't know how to fix it. And I thought if I kept working harder, one day everything would be fine." Meera shook her head gently. "I never wanted perfection, Arav. I only wanted partnership." He took a shaky breath. "And I never wanted to be distant. I only wanted to be capable, someone you could rely on." Their eyes met, truly met,
And for the first time in a long while, they saw each other. Not the stress, not the defenses, not the anger or the fear. Just each other. I sat back and watched as they continued, their voices soft and fragile, but honest. Arav said, I should have told you how overwhelmed I felt, how scared I was at work, how I felt like I was feeling as a husband. Mira replied, and I should have told you how lonely I felt, how I needed emotional support, how much I missed the old us. Arav looked at her with regret. Why didn't you tell me? She answered quietly. Because you always looked so tired. I didn't want to add more weight. He nodded painfully. And I didn't speak because I didn't want to worry you. They both gave a sad smile, the kind that comes when people finally understand each other's pain.
A soft dawn light began to creep into the room from the window. The sun was rising, painting the floor in pale orange. It felt symbolic somehow. A new day, a new beginning, a new chance. The children were still sleeping too deeply to notice anything, thank God. Mira looked at the sunlight and whispered, I don't know if everything will be okay, Arav, but I don't want to run away anymore. Arav gently squeezed her hand. I don't know how to fix everything, but I don't want to lose you. And then, for the first time that night, they leaned into each other. Not a tight embrace, not a dramatic reconciliation, just a quiet resting of their foreheads together. Two tired souls sharing one breath. A moment of peace in a storm-filled night. I felt my heart loosen for the first time in hours. This was the turning point I had prayed for. Not the end of their problems, not yet, but the beginning of facing them together. As they held each other gently, I made a silent promise in my heart. I will help you heal. I will help you rebuild. I will not let this family fall apart. My love for them was strong enough to guide us all, even through the darkest hours. And little by little, the storm inside that house began to calm. Not fully, but enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to hope. Enough to try again. The room was quieter now, calmer. The kind of calm that comes after a long, heavy storm, when the sky is still gray, the ground still wet, but the worst has passed. Arav and Mira sat close together, their hands loosely intertwined. The early morning sunlight fell softly across the floor, touching their faces with a gentle glow. It felt like the world had paused just for them, giving them a moment to breathe, to feel, to reflect. I watched quietly from the sofa, letting them have the space that their hearts had long been asking for. The children slept peacefully beside me, unaware that their parents had just walked back from the edge of something irreversible. After several minutes of silence, Mira spoke. Her voice was soft, almost careful. Arav, what happened to us? Arav took a slow breath and replied in an equally quiet voice. We forgot to listen. We forgot to talk. We forgot to share our burdens. Mira nodded, tears still resting in her eyelashes. And we forgot to hold each other when life felt heavy. Arav looked at her with a sad smile. I thought I was protecting you by keeping my problems to myself. And I thought I was protecting you by hiding my loneliness, she whispered. They both gave the smallest, saddest laugh, not because anything was funny, but because they finally understood each other's mistakes. I spoke softly. Talking is not a sign of weakness. Hiding pain does not make a person strong. Marriage is built on honesty, not silence. Mira looked down. I didn't want to leave, she said quietly, but I felt invisible. Arab shook his head, placing his hand gently on her cheek. You were never invisible, Mira. I saw you every day. I just didn't know how to reach out. She leaned into his touch, letting herself feel safe for the first time in months. Sometimes healing begins not with big apologies, but with small truths, spoken gently. Mira exhaled deeply. I didn't pack the suitcase to punish you. I packed it because I felt like I had nothing left inside me. Arab's face twisted with pain at her words. I'm so sorry you reached that point, he whispered. She looked at him carefully. What about you, Arab? What have you been carrying alone? He closed his eyes, gathering courage. Then he spoke. I am scared every day. Scared of failing at work. Scared of bills. Scared of not being enough. Scared of losing you. His voice cracked. And tonight, I almost did. Mira placed her hand over his heart gently. You don't have to carry all that fear alone, she said softly. A husband is not supposed to be a hero. He is supposed to be a partner. Arab looked into her eyes, truly looked, and for the first time in a long time, he let himself be vulnerable. I need you, he whispered. Mira's eyes filled with tears. And I need you too, she answered.
Just then, one of the children stirred on the sofa. A little yawn, a small stretch, sleepy eyes blinking awake. Daddy, the little one whispered, rubbing his eyes. Arav and Mira turned immediately, and I saw something change in them both. Something soften. Something become clear. This wasn't just about two adults and their pain. This was about a family. A family that needed healing. A family worth holding on to. Mira stood slowly and walked toward the sofa. She sat beside the children, kissing their foreheads, pulling them gently against her. Arav came and sat on the floor beside them, his arms circling all of them in a silent embrace. It was the most beautiful image I had seen in months. A broken family trying to put its pieces back together with love. As the children played quietly with their toys, Arav walked toward me. Ma, he said softly, sitting beside me on the edge of the sofa. I looked at him, waiting. He took my hand in his. Thank you, he whispered. You saved us tonight. I shook my head gently. No, beta, I didn't save you. You and Mira saved yourselves. He lowered his head. I didn't know she was hurting this much, he said quietly. I didn't know I was hurting her. I placed my hand on his cheek. You were not hurting her on purpose. You were hurting because you were hurting. And hurt people sometimes push away the people they love most. Arav's eyes filled again. I'm going to fix this, he whispered. Not fix, I corrected gently. Heal. Fixing is for things. Healing is for hearts. He nodded slowly. I will heal our family, Ma. I promise. And for the first time that night, I truly believed him. Mira joined us, sitting down gently on the floor beside Arav. I want to say something, she said softly. We both looked at her. She wiped a tear and continued. I am not leaving, she said firmly. My suitcase is still by the door, but my heart is still here. Arav exhaled shakily, relief washing over him. Mira took his hand. I want to try again, she whispered. But this time, I want us to talk, not hide, not pretend, not drift away. Arav nodded immediately. I want that too. She smiled weakly. It won't be easy. He smiled back. Nothing real ever is. And that simple exchange
soft, honest, humble, felt like the most important moment of their marriage.
As the sky turned a soft golden color, the atmosphere inside the house also warmed. The children laughed. Mira smiled softly. Arav's shoulders relaxed. The house didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like something had opened, like the doors and windows of their hearts had been unlocked after being jammed shut for too long. I looked around and whispered a thank you inside my heart. Thank you for giving them another chance. Thank you for letting love win over fear. Thank you for guiding us through the storm. After breakfast, Arav quietly picked up the suitcase from near the door. He looked at it for a long moment. Then, without saying a word, he unzipped it and began taking out Mira's clothes, one by one, and placing them gently back in the wardrobe. Mira watched him with soft eyes. She didn't stop him. She didn't say a word. She simply walked over to him and placed her hand on his shoulder. Together they unpacked the suitcase, not just removing clothes, but removing fear, doubt, and distance. Every folded cloth returned to its place felt like a piece of their relationship returning home. I stood at the doorway, watching quietly, tears sliding down my cheeks. This wasn't a perfect ending. This wasn't happily ever after. This was real life. Two flawed people choosing each other, again. Choosing communication, again. Choosing love, again. And sometimes that choice is the greatest turning point of all. Morning had fully arrived now. The sun filled the house with a warm, gentle light that touched every corner softly. The storm inside us had eased, leaving behind a quiet stillness like the calm after heavy rain. The air felt lighter, the house felt safer. But healing does not happen simply because a new day begins. Healing begins when hearts accept that change is needed and when people choose each other again with honesty instead of fear. Arav and Mira were trying. I could see it in the way they looked at each other, the way they moved closer when they spoke, and the way they didn't hide behind forced smiles anymore. There was vulnerability. There was tenderness. There was effort. That mattered more than anything.
We sat at the dining table, all of us. Arav made tea, Mira warmed some rotis. The children laughed as if nothing strange had happened at dawn. For a moment watching them, I felt something deep inside my chest finally loosen. Mira glanced at me from across the table. "Ma, thank you for staying calm last night," she said softly. I shook my head. "You don't have to thank me, beta. I'm family. Families face storms together." She lowered her eyes, touched by the simplicity of my words. Arav added gently, "I think we forgot how to be a family." I reached over and placed my hand on his. "You didn't forget. You just stopped remembering." He gave a sad smile, the kind that carries both regret and hope. After breakfast, Mira came to sit beside me in the living room. A soft breeze came in through the window, carrying the smell of fresh morning air. "Ma," she said slowly, "can I talk to you alone?" I nodded. She looked down at her hands, playing nervously with her fingers. "I want to fix things with Arav," she began softly. "But I'm scared." "Of what?" I asked. "That things will go back to how they were, that silence will return, that I will become invisible again." Her voice trembled on that last word.
I took her hand gently. Mira, a marriage does not stay healthy on its own. It needs care. It needs conversation. It needs work from both sides. She nodded slowly. I know, and I want to do my part. I truly do. Then tell him what you need. Not with anger, not with fear, but with clarity. She looked at me with soft, searching eyes. And what if he cannot change? She whispered. I squeezed her hand. Mira, then you decide what is right for your heart. But right now, give him a chance. He is trying, and that is the first step. Her shoulders relaxed a little. She breathed out slowly, as if letting out months of heaviness. Thank you, she whispered. It means a lot to hear that. Later, Arav found me in the kitchen while I was washing some cups. Arav, can we talk? I dried my hands and nodded. He leaned against the kitchen counter, looking troubled. I feel guilty, he said quietly. I didn't see Mira's pain. I didn't notice how lonely she had become. You were carrying your own pain, I reminded him gently. But that is not an excuse, he said, shaking his head. She deserved better. I stepped closer and placed my hand on his shoulder. Arav, guilt does not heal anything. Responsibility does. Love does. Willingness does. He took a shaky breath. I want to be better, he said. For her, for the kids, for myself. And you will be, I said softly, but slowly, step by step. Healing takes time. He looked down. Do you think she will trust me again? I answered without hesitation. Yes, but only if your actions become bigger than your promises. He nodded firmly. He understood.
In the afternoon, the children insisted on going to the small park near the house. Dadi, come, they said, pulling at my hands. Arav and Mira exchanged a small smile, the kind parents share when they see happiness in their children. We all walked out together. The sun was warm, the sky was clear. The trees swayed gently as if blessing the moment. Mira held the youngest child's hand. Arav carried the older one on his shoulders. I walked beside them, watching quietly. At one point, Mira slipped her hand into Arav's. He didn't look surprised. He didn't pull away. He simply held her hand back, as naturally as breathing. That sight made my heart swell. The world was noisy around us, children laughing, leaves rustling, birds calling. Yet somehow the moment felt peaceful, like a fresh chapter written softly into the day. When we returned home, I noticed something different. Arav followed Mira into the kitchen to help her. He asked her, "What should I chop?" She smiled and handed him the vegetables. They cooked together. Not perfectly. They bumped elbows, dropped a spoon, oversalted one dish. But they laughed together. Real laughter. The kind that comes from letting guards down. It warmed the house. Later, Mira sat with the children doing their homework, while Arav cleaned the living room, humming quietly to himself. These were tiny things, simple things, ordinary things. But ordinary things done with care can heal extraordinary wounds.
After dinner, when the children were asleep, Arav and Mira sat with me once more. Arav spoke first. "Ma, thank you for being here." Mira nodded. "Yes, thank you for not judging us, for not shouting, for not pushing us apart." "I would never push you apart," I said softly. "My only wish is that your family stays strong and honest." They both lowered their eyes, knowing how true that was. Mira whispered, "We will try, Ma." Arav nodded, "We will do better." I smiled, a tired, grateful smile. "I believe you," I said, and I meant it. Night settled slowly over the house, bringing with it a soft, quiet peace. The lights inside were warm, almost golden, giving the rooms a gentle glow. It felt different from the previous night. Calmer, kinder, safer. There was no tension holding the walls tight, no silence cutting the air like a knife,
only a steady stillness, the kind that comes after people have spoken truthfully and wiped their eyes clean.
Arav and Mira sat close together on the living room couch, not touching, but not distant either. There was a new closeness between them, a fragile, rebuilding closeness. I sat on the single sofa near them, watching the quiet scene with a heart that felt both relieved and hopeful. Mira was the first to speak. Arav, earlier today when we were cooking, I felt something I haven't felt in a long time. Arav looked at her gently. What did you feel? Safe, she whispered. I felt safe. Arav swallowed hard. His voice was low when he answered. I want you to feel safe with me every day. Mira shook her head softly. No, Arav, not every day. Some days will be bad. Some days we will argue. Some days we will get tired. That is normal. She paused. But I want us to feel safe overall. I want our home to be a place where we can fall apart without fear. Arav listened with full attention, not interrupting her. I could tell he was finally hearing her, not just the words, but the meaning behind them. He nodded slowly. You're right. I didn't create that space for you. I was so caught up in my own worries, I forgot you had your own. Mira reached out and touched his hand lightly. And I should have spoken earlier. I should have told you I was lonely. I kept quiet until the silence became too big. There was no blame in her voice, only truth. This was how healing looked. Not dramatic, not loud, but gentle, honest, steady.
Later, Arav suggested something unexpected. Mira, want to go for a small walk? Just the two of us. Mira looked surprised, pleasantly surprised. Yes, she said softly. They put on their shoes and stepped outside. The night air was cool. Street lights glowed softly. A light breeze carried the smell of nearby trees. I watched them from the window as they walked slowly down the lane, side by side. Arav spoke with his hands, explaining something. Mira listened, nodding. Then she said something, and he stopped to look at her with full attention. It felt like watching a couple meet each other again after a long, painful separation. Except they had never truly gone anywhere. They were simply finding their way back. When they returned, their faces were calmer. Arav helped Mira take off her shawl. She smiled at him in a way I had not seen for months. Soft, open, trusting. They sat near me in the living room. We talked, Arav said. Mira added, really talked, honestly. I smiled. And? Arav looked at Mira before answering. We agreed on something important. Mira nodded. We will check on each other every day. Not in a big, dramatic way, just small things. Arav continued. We will ask each other, how are you feeling today? And we will answer honestly. Mira smiled gently. We will share little things. We will not let silence grow again. I felt my heart swell. It was such a simple promise. But simple promises kept daily can rebuild what fear tries to break. Arav turned to me suddenly. Ma, I also need to say something to you. I looked at him quietly. He took a breath. He said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you saw what happened last night. I'm sorry that our home became a place of fear instead of peace. And I'm sorry that you had to grab the kids and run because of us. His voice shook slightly. I let things get too far. I didn't see the warning signs. I didn't take care of my family the way I should have. Mira looked down, touched by his sincerity. I placed my hand on his. Beta, you made a mistake, but you faced it. You learned from it, and you are trying to change. That is all anyone can ask.
His shoulders relaxed as if a heavy weight had finally been lifted.
Before going to bed, Meera handed Arav a small folded note. I wrote this earlier, she said shyly. I didn't know if I would give it to you, but I want to now. He opened it slowly. Inside, in her neat handwriting, were just 4 simple words. I still choose us. Arav's eyes filled. Meera touched his arm softly, and the house grew warm with a quiet, glowing hope. The house was quiet after our long day, but it was a peaceful quiet, not a broken one. Arav and Meera had gone to tuck the children into bed, and I stayed in the living room, allowing myself a moment to breathe. I looked around at the soft yellow lights, the toys scattered on the sofa, the faint sound of whispers coming from the children's room. It didn't look like a perfect home, but today it looked like a healing one. A small smile touched my lips. Maybe that was enough. After a while, the children came out of their room and ran to me. Dadi, the older one whispered, Mama and Papa are talking nicely again. I hugged him gently. Yes, beta, they are trying their best. He looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes. No more crying? My heart ached softly at his question. I hoped not. I brushed his hair. And even if there are tears, they will be gentle ones, not scary ones. The younger one climbed into my lap, hugging me tightly. I like when everyone is happy, he said in his sleepy voice. I kissed his forehead. Me too, I whispered. Their innocence reminded me why healing mattered so much. Children absorb everything, the silence, the tension, the fear, the hope. They see even when adults try to hide. Arav and Meera understood this now. That gave me comfort. When the children went back to bed, Arav joined me in the kitchen. Ma, I made tea for us, he said softly. The simple gesture warmed my heart. He poured 2 cups and we sat at the small table. He looked tired, but a good kind of tired. The kind that comes after crying, talking, apologizing, forgiving. I didn't realize, he whispered, how badly we were falling apart. Sometimes we see cracks only when something breaks, I replied. He nodded, staring at his tea. I want to be a better father and a better husband. You already started today, I said gently. Tomorrow, continue. And the day after that. Small steps, that's how families grow again. He breathed deeply. I will, Ma, I promise. There was no pressure in his voice, just quiet determination. Later, Meera walked into the kitchen, her face soft and thoughtful. Ma, can I sit with you? Of course. She sat down beside me, holding her cup in both hands. I need to tell you something, she began quietly. I'm sorry for letting things get so bad. I'm sorry for packing my bags, for making you feel like you had to run with the kids. Her voice trembled. I never wanted to create fear in this house. I placed my hand over hers. You were hurting, beta. You didn't know what else to do. She shook her head gently. But still, I could have spoken earlier. I should have trusted myself more. I should have trusted Arav more. Trust is built every day, I said softly. You are rebuilding it now. That is what matters. She nodded, tears glistening but not falling. Arav entered the kitchen again, and Meera looked up at him. Come, she said softly, patting a chair beside her. He sat down. Today was hard, Meera said gently, but it was also important. Arav nodded. She continued. I think we forgot how to talk kindly. We forgot how to listen. We forgot how to be on the same side. Arav took her hand slowly. And now? He asked. Now, she whispered, I want to write a new chapter. With you, not alone. Arav smiled softly, the kind of smile that carries gratitude and longing. We will write it together, he said, 1 page at a time. Their hands remained joined. No tension, just warmth.
Before going to bed, the 3 of us sat together once more in the living room. Arav spoke first. Mira and I talked. We want to make some changes. Good changes, Mira added. I listened quietly. Arav continued. I'm going to reduce some late nights at work. I'll try to be home for dinner as often as I can. And I will be more honest, Mira said gently. No more silence. If something is hurting me, I will say it, kindly. Arav smiled at her. And I will listen, truly listen. They looked so different from the couple who had stood in that room at 3 a.m., faces tense, hearts breaking. Tonight, they looked like two people who had been lost and were finally finding their way back. The clock struck midnight. We all stood up, ready to end the long, emotional day. Arav hugged me first. Thank you, Ma, he said softly, for not walking away from us, for being our strength when we were falling. Mira hugged me next. You gave us understanding when we expected anger. That saved us. I held her close and said, You saved yourselves. I was only a witness. They smiled through tired eyes. The house felt warmer, quieter, gentler. A home again.
As I settled into my room, I reflected on everything. People think families break suddenly, but they don't. They break slowly. Unnoticed words, missed moments, silent evenings. And people think families heal suddenly, but they don't. They heal through one small act of care, one honest conversation, one gentle promise at a time. Tonight, Arav and Mira had taken their first real steps toward healing, and I felt grateful that I had been there to see it. Before closing my eyes, I whispered a quiet prayer in the darkness. Thank you for giving this family another chance. Guide them gently. Keep their hearts open. Keep their home peaceful. The room felt calm. My heart felt full. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, new efforts. But tonight we had peace. And sometimes peace is the most beautiful victory of all. The next morning, when I opened my eyes, sunlight was already filling the room. Soft, warm, gentle, like a quiet promise that the day ahead would be kinder than the one before. For a moment, I lay still, letting the warmth touch my face. It felt peaceful. It felt steady. It felt like something inside the house had shifted, just slightly, but enough to matter. I sat up, stretched my hands, and listened. No arguing, no hurried footsteps, no deep, painful silence. Only the simple sounds of family, a kettle boiling, a child's sleepy voice, the soft clatter of cups in the kitchen. It made me smile.
When I walked out into the living room, I saw something that touched my heart deeply. Arav was helping the older child with his school uniform, gently buttoning it and fixing the collar. Mira was braiding the younger child's hair, talking to her in a soft, loving voice. They weren't doing anything special, no dramatic gestures, no forced smiles, just small acts of care. But those small acts were louder than any words. Arav looked at Mira and asked quietly, Tea with sugar or honey today? Mira smiled a little. Honey, thank you. That exchange, so simple, so normal, felt like the most beautiful moment. It showed effort, respect, attention. It showed that they were choosing each other again, not out of habit, but out of hope. Mira made breakfast while Arav helped the children pack their school bags. I sat at the table, just watching everything unfold with quiet gratitude. Mira placed a plate in front of me. Ma, I made your favorite, she said softly. I touched her hand and smiled. Thank you, beta. Arav brought fresh fruit for the kids, and the children laughed over something only they understood. It felt like the house had exhaled, like all of us had. The stress of the past weeks, the loneliness, the tension, the fear, none of it had disappeared, but it no longer controlled the room. Healing had begun, and healing, even when slow, brings a light that changes everything. When breakfast was done and the children were ready to leave, Arav knelt down and hugged each of them gently. "Have a good day," he said softly. "Be kind, listen to your teachers." Meera kissed their cheeks. "I'll be here when you come back." The children waved at us as the school van arrived. I stood beside Arav and Meera at the doorway, watching the children climb in, waving from the windows. "They look happy today," Meera whispered. Arav nodded. "They feel the peace. Kids always know." And he was right. Children can feel the air around them, the love, the fear, the safety, the silence. Today, they felt safe again.
As the van drove away, Arav turned to Meera. "Walk with me?" he asked. She looked surprised, but she nodded. I watched them walk down the lane side by side, sharing quiet words. Their shoulders were not tense. Their steps matched. Their heads leaned slightly toward each other when they spoke. Two people learning how to be partners again. Two hearts trying to understand instead of assume. Two souls trying to return home, not to a house, but to each other. And watching them, I felt something shift inside me too. Faith, hope, relief. A belief that this time they would handle their pain differently. This time they would not let silence grow. This time they would protect their love, not hide from it. When Arav and Mia returned from their walk, something was different about their faces. There was softness in their eyes and a quiet understanding between them, the kind that comes only after two people finally decide to stop fighting life alone. Arav looked calmer, Meera looked lighter, and together they looked like a pair who had taken their first step back toward each other. They came inside quietly, but there was no heaviness, only a kind of tired tenderness. Meera placed her hand gently on my shoulder. "Ma," she said softly, "thank you for staying." I held her hand. "I will always stay when my family needs me." Arav stepped closer. He didn't say anything at first. He just hugged me, a long, warm, grateful hug. "Thank you for not giving up on us," he whispered. And in that moment, I felt my heart warm in a way I had not felt in months. The rest of the day moved quietly, but every moment carried a new kind of warmth. Arav made tea for all of us. Meera folded laundry while playing soft music. I sat in the living room knitting, feeling the softness of the wool between my fingers. It was such a normal day, so simple, so ordinary. But sometimes ordinary is where healing truly begins. Sometimes the small things, a shared smile, a cup of tea, a gentle word, carry more weight than any big gesture. During lunch, Arav said, "Let's eat together every day. No phones, no distractions, just us." Meera nodded. "I want that too." I looked at both of them and felt a quiet pride. This was not perfect. This was not magically fixed. But it was real. It was honest. It was human. And that was enough.
Later in the afternoon, Meera sat beside me on the sofa. "Ma," she said slowly, "I know I made mistakes. I hurt you too. I was rude and impatient, and I stopped talking to you." Her voice was shaking, but she didn't look away. I placed my hand over hers. "We all make mistakes, Beta. Pain makes people say things even when they don't mean them." She looked like she might cry. "I don't want to be that person anymore," she whispered. "I want to be someone my children can learn from." "You already are," I said softly. "They just need to see you forgive yourself." She exhaled, her shoulders relaxing. And in that moment, something important healed between us too, the quiet distance we had allowed to grow. Arav joined us with 3 cups of tea. "What are you two talking about?" he asked, smiling softly. Mira looked at him and said, "About starting fresh." He nodded and sat down beside her. "I think we all need that." As evening came, warm orange light filled the home. The children returned and ran inside with laughter spilling out of their tiny bodies. They hugged Mira. They jumped into Arav's arms. They sat beside me and told me all their little stories about school. The house felt alive again. Not perfect, not flawless, but alive. While Mira cooked dinner, Arav helped the children finish their homework. I chopped vegetables beside her, and she smiled as she watched her family grow whole again. During dinner, Mira reached for Arav's hand under the table. He squeezed her fingers gently. The children didn't notice, but I did. And that single gesture told me everything I needed to know. They were choosing each other. Again. Bravely. Quietly. Deliberately.
After the children fell asleep and the house grew calm again, I stepped out into the balcony for a moment of silence. The sky was clear, the stars were steady, the wind felt soft against my cheek. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. Maybe this is what healing looks like, I thought. Not grand speeches, not dramatic moments, just small steps, small efforts, small promises kept day by day. Arav and Mira stood behind me after a moment. "Ma, we want you to stay with us for as long as you'd like." Mira added softly, "We want you here, truly." I turned to them with tears in my eyes. "I am not going anywhere," I whispered. And in that moment, the house finally felt whole, not because everything was perfect, but because we were choosing to heal together. The next few days passed with a gentleness I had almost forgotten. Not every moment was perfect, but each moment carried effort. And that made all the difference. The children laughed more freely, Arav and Mira spoke more softly, and the house no longer felt heavy. It felt like a place where love was learning to breathe again. Sometimes the hardest storms come not to destroy a family, but to clear the air, to push people back toward the things they once took for granted, to remind them what truly matters. And that's exactly what happened here.
One evening, when the sky outside was turning pink and gold, the younger child climbed into my lap with a tiny drawing in his hand. "Mama," she said proudly, "look, I made us." I unfolded the paper slowly. It showed all of us standing together, holding hands. Arav, Mira, the two little ones, and me in the middle. There were no frowns, no angry lines, just bright colors and smiling faces. It touched my heart more than words can express. Because children don't draw what they see in front of them. They draw what they feel. And if she felt this, unity, love, safety, then it meant we were truly healing. I kissed her forehead. "It's beautiful," I whispered. She nodded proudly and ran off to show it to her parents. I stayed sitting there for a long time, staring at that drawing, letting the warmth in my chest grow. That night, when everyone had gone to bed, Arav came to sit beside me on the sofa. He didn't speak for a moment. He just sat quietly like he was gathering courage. "Ma," he said finally. I wasn't listening to Mira. I kept thinking my stress was mine alone, but it was hurting all of you. I placed a hand on his. "Life becomes lighter when we share our burdens, beta. You don't have to carry everything alone." He nodded. Then Mira came out from the bedroom and joined us. Her voice was gentle, honest. I stopped telling Arav what I really felt. I kept everything inside until it turned into anger. She looked down at her hands. "I don't want to repeat that mistake." I reached out and held both their hands, one in each of mine. "You both learned something,"
I said softly. And learning is what saves us. Their eyes softened as they looked at each other. In that moment, I knew they would be all right. Not because life would suddenly become easy, but because they now had the courage to face it together. A few days later, we all had dinner together. As we cleared the table, Meera suddenly said, "Let's start a new tradition. Every night, before we sleep, we say one thing we are grateful for." Arab smiled. "I like that." The children clapped with excitement. So that night, we sat in the living room floor forming a small circle. Arab said he was grateful for peace. Meera said she was grateful for family. The older child said he was grateful for laughter. The younger one said she was grateful for ice cream. And when it was my turn, I took a deep breath. "I am grateful," I said quietly, "that we found our way back to each other." Everyone smiled. But the smile on Araf's face and the softness in Meera's eyes, that is something I will never forget.
As I lay in bed that night, I understood something clearly. Families don't stay strong because everything goes right. They stay strong because they keep choosing each other through mistakes, through pain, through confusion, through silence. Love is not loud. Love is not dramatic. Love is not perfect. Love is a quiet commitment, renewed every day, to stay, to understand, to forgive, to try again. And that night, in that peaceful home, I felt grateful for every single thing that led us here, even the difficult parts, even the moments that broke my heart, because without them, we would not have grown. We would not have understood each other. We would not have strengthened our bond. We would not have learned how to love better. The house slept peacefully around me, children breathing softly, doors closed gently, warmth in every corner, and I whispered into the quiet, "Thank you for letting us begin again." The story did not end with perfection. It ended with hope, with healing, with the promise of a better tomorrow. And sometimes that is the most beautiful ending a family can have.